guys, it's Nick the Booksmith. Welcome back, welcome back. Today I am not going to tea dye paper, but I'm going to show you how I got this effect on this book cover by using just some white cotton fabric that I have, and it can be any white cotton fabric. I start with white because I didn't want any other color undertones. Other colors might work, ivory or cream or something, but I haven't tried it, so you'll have to try it. That's what we're gonna do today. We're just going to make that effect on this cloth, and then it can be used for all kinds of things, like that book I used it on. Okay, so I suggest gloves because you'll have orange fingertips if you don't. I use coffee, instant coffee. For my tea dyeing for this, I use coffee actually. So I guess it's coffee dyeing, isn't it? What you'll need is just a piece of white cloth. You'll need some diluted coffee. So this is kind of like what I would think would be like a regular cup of brewed coffee. Just that amount of coffee added to it. Then you're going to need some that is twice as concentrated, if not more. It'll be up to you. You'll have to test it and see what it is that you like. I don't measure, I just add more until it's darker. So there's that. And then you'll need just some clear water. Alrighty. So the first thing that we do is we're going to take the lightest coffee, and we are going to douse this in here. Get it nice and saturated. And you can have this lighter or darker. And I'm going to squeeze some of it out. Just don't want it soppy. And here's the hard part. Now we got to let it dry. That's the most thing about this process, is that it's waiting in between times to let it dry. If it's a nice day outside, you can put it out in the sunshine or out in the breeze, and it doesn't take long at all. Or if you're really impatient, you can always use a hair dryer or something like that. I think I probably will use a hair dryer just because I am the impatient type. Well, you guys know that. I dipped 2 pieces of cloth just to show you the difference, if there really is a difference when we get done. This one is like pillowcase fabric or like a bed sheet type fabric. And this one is more of an open weave, like what they sell to make baby blankets out of, like the gauzy stuff, or burp cloths or that kind of thing. This one will probably end up to be a little bit more rustic because of the looser weave in it. And you can see both pieces will pick up color in some, well, it's hard to see on camera. It's easier to see on this one. You can see the areas where the fabric picks up more color in some areas. And this one is doing it too. It's harder to see in the bright light. So you're gonna have to trust me. Okay, so the reason why we need to make sure that these pieces of fabric are dry after we've dipped them in the coffee solution is if you don't, you won't get very defined spots. You'll get muddy, diffused, which can be cool, but that's not what I'm showing you today. The next thing that we're going to do is we go in with the darker of the coffee solution, and you can use a paintbrush or a eyedropper or whatever floats your boat, man. And what I usually do, I haven't done this in an eon, but I do remember. This piece is much bigger, isn't it? What I usually do is I pick a side of the fabric that I want to work on, and then I just saturate it in some spots, just random. And if you're going to be covering a book or well, I don't know, whatever you're going to be wanting to do with it. Maybe you'll want to plan your placement more than just have a random thing going on. Again, up to you. Maybe you'll want big, huge splotches, or teeny, teeny, tiny ones, or both. And by having the fabric dry, you'll find that this darker coffee solution will create these little pools that have the rings of color that are darker around the outside. It'll create that distinct edge to it. And you can go over these spots and make half of it darker than the other side, or, you know, just play with it. And I'm just going to drip some just here and there. And I'll do this one as well. And different fabrics will soak up differently and have different patterns that they'll allow. So it's all trial and error. I like a very haphazard, unplanned look, but maybe sometimes you don't. Maybe sometimes you really do want it planned. All right. And if you're not getting the rings you want, like this one has a really great ring on it, just add more of this darker solution to the center and let it soak out. Of course, just remember that the more you add, those spots can grow. So if you don't want the spots to grow very much, then you have to have little teeny, teeny, tiny drips that you add instead of letting it sploosh down like I'm doing. This look ends up being kind of a really cool shroud type, like a dirty shroud look. Okay, or old parchment. And again, we have to stop here and allow this to dry. Sometimes I get it to a point that's beyond what I want it to be because we're not finished, and some of this will be taken away. So I will show you that as soon as these are dry, and we'll move on to the next layer. At this stage, as long as it is, I would say, at least 90% dry, it'll be okay. So no worries on that. Now I'm going to go in with just the clear water and a paintbrush or a spoon or whatever. And what the clear water is going to do is it's going to push out color from any area that you want. It won't erase it completely, but it's going to push it out and make negative spaces in amongst this. So no matter if you put it in the middle of a dark spot, or you put some just on the original tea-stained spot, it will push this around, the color that's already in it from the coffee, and it will create even more like smoke rings because it's pushing this away from the center wherever you drop it. And the beauty about this technique is you can do as many layers back and forth as you want. You can mess around with it for as much as you want to. Or you could just do a couple of layers and leave it at that. When I've done it, I have at least done 3 to 4 layers of color. but honestly, I think it kind of looks cool at all the stages, so it's wherever you want to stop, depending on what it is you're doing and what effect you're trying to reach. But I just love how that clear water just pushes that around. And it's kind of a watercolor paint effect, because clear water does a similar, I'm not a watercolorist, but I know that clear water will push the paint around if you're painting with watercolors, and it's a similar concept. But it definitely makes everything look stained and kind of water stained, like it's been sitting in the attic for a while and there was a leak in the roof, or the roof. The roof. Whatever it is, there was a leak in it, in the shingles. And it dries a little lighter than it looks when it's wet, but a lot of things do that, right? And you can see that this fabric here, that was the bed sheet or the pillowcase or whatever it was, I don't remember. It picks up the color a little differently, a little lighter, but still very, very cool in its own right. And maybe you want lighter. Maybe you don't want it as dark and rustic and primitive as this looks. So you'll have to play around with some different types of fabric, some swatches, and see what kind of an effect you like with. Pick out your favorite fabric. And at this point, you can go back and forth a little bit, and while these middles are wet with the clear water, you can add a little bit to let that bleed and go through the clear water spots too. So maybe if you took too much away, the clear water took too much of the color away, and you want to add it back, add it while it's wet, and then that way it will saturate that spot. You just don't want to saturate it all, or you won't get the little smoke rings. Let's do the same thing over here, but just kind of add some little drips here and there. And that's definitely the beauty of this technique, is that if you think you've done too much in an area and you don't like it, you can take it away with the clear water, at least quite a bit of it. This technique is not for anything that would get wet later. Not that, I mean, if it goes on a book, you don't get your books wet. I mean, at least I hope you don't. This is one of those things that you don't want to get this wet when you're finished with your technique of getting your water damaged spots, or whatever you want to call them, and you cover a book or whatever, make an art piece or whatever. You can always put something over it, you can use like a spray, like a Scotch Guard, like a fabric protector spray, even if it would like accidentally get a drip of water on it. Those sprays are meant to repel water and to keep it off. But any kind of sealer, if you decide to do a type of sealer, please test it first, because some of those sprays will leave a sheen, or they could change if you're too heavy. If you spray it too heavy, it can saturate it and it can change it. So definitely test it out on a scrap before you go for the whole enchilada, because you don't want to mess up something that you've spent, at least 15 minutes doing, right? Okay. When it gets to a level like this where you can tell that probably 50 to 75% of the fabric is damp again, then you don't want to keep adding while it's damp, unless you want to take some away, because it'll just become a muddy mess and you won't get the definition anymore. So let it dry. If you get to a place where your fabric is getting a little too saturated and maybe your spots, you're starting to lose all your smoke rings, just stop and let it dry and then start another layer of color after that. So now these two pieces are mostly dry. And like I said, you can stop at any point that you'd like, or you can keep going. Another thing to do before you cover a book or use the fabric in any way is don't forget to look at the reverse side, because it will be lighter, paler, and just a little bit different. And there have been many times that I have done one side only to turn it over and like the back side better. That is one of the rules of photography, is don't forget to look above, around, behind, and beside, because sometimes you miss the best stuff if you don't look around at all the angles. So I know you're probably gonna ask, well, does it work with fabric dye? Does it work with watercolor paint? I don't know. Try it and tell me. I've only used the coffee or coffee and tea, depending on what color I was going for, because that's the color that I wanted. This worked so well, I figured, why reinvent the wheel? But you might have other supplies on hand that you could try out. I encourage you to do that. So that is my technique for making these water-stained fabrics, shrouds, parchment-y looking fabric, whatever you want to call it. I hope you enjoyed the process and maybe it gave you some inspiration for your next project. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope everybody is having a good one, and I will see you all really, really soon in the next video. Bye, guys.